Hello and welcome to Word TV. I'm Anastasia Tabanos. While at HostingCon, we had the opportunity to catch up with executives from Rackspace Managed Hosting, Exo Communications, and the newly merged The Planet and EV1 Servers, and put them side by side on a panel as Isabel Wang prompted them to discuss everything from the general state of the industry to the intimate details of their companies. Here's part 2 of an exclusive Word TV roundtable discussion.
I recently read an article about Amazon's S3 service, which offers utility storage. Basically, you can get as much storage as you want at a per unit price and expand. There's no concept of a box. You just scale up as you need it. Doug, do you see this model as well as Lou and Barbara's services as a threat to the leasing a dedicated server model?
No, I see it as an opportunity. I think that it's a space that anytime you're dealing with IT, you're going to need to have a processor, you're going to need to have storage, and you're going to need to have a network. And so if you're in the hosting business, you're supplying all three of those one way or the other. Now, the traditional hosting business that we've been in, we've supplied them in a confined, here it is, this is how much you get. And now we're starting to spread out, and we're starting to give bandwidth opportunities. We do a little bit on the storage. I would imagine that those will be functions that as we find better and better tools to manage our networks and manage our storage products in a hosting environment, that there'll be an offer for people can have as much as they want. And I'm sure they'll have to do it in their space. Anybody who builds an infrastructure needs those three items. And customers are going to want them in different capacity.
Will people continue to want it from the Planet EV1, or will they get it from Amazon though? So basically my question is the hosting industry in a better position to build out infrastructure, or will newcomers like Amazon and Google be able to overtake us in the build out of infrastructure?
I've seen a lot of battles. Barbara's mentioned that you don't want to compete with the big guys. In my past careers, I found it very exciting to compete with the big guys, because if you're more creative, you can come to the market faster and move faster. So sure, those fellows are going to be in that space too, but I'm not worried about it from our standpoint. We need to figure out whether that becomes a big point in our strategy, and hopefully through our creativity and ability to move, we'll get our fair share. This is a big market. We're going to have big players in this. But there's going to be room for players like Planet EV1.
So Lou and Doug, you guys service a lot of shared hosting resellers, and Barbara, you're kind of working with the shared hosting type customers. What do you think about the shared hosting market? Where is it going, and is it facing competition from companies who do free hosting and the free consumer applications like Flickr and like MySpace? Do they take away from the need for consumers and small businesses to have websites, or does shared hosting continue to be valuable?
Well, I think all these issues are kind of interrelated. And I'm not in the shared market, so I don't really understand. I'm not sort of an expert on that. I sort of defer to Barbara, but I really like one of the things that Barbara said is about the business world and the business service world versus the consumer world. And I think one of the things that's happening is hosting was a business service from the very beginning. And what you're seeing is that everything is going to be hostable in the future. My wife hosts photos. Well, she doesn't know she hosts photos, but she hosts photos. And, Office will be hostable one day. The OS will be hostable one day. And I think what you're seeing is the market is expanding so radically in terms of what can be hosted that you're seeing all sorts of services crop up from Amazon, from Google, from MSN. And look, I prefer they weren't in our market, all things being equal, but I think that they're actually in a different market. And it's so massive, and there's so many things going on. And so there's always going to be a need for very robust business class shared hosting. That does not mean that if I want to do a family website and I'm willing to tolerate advertising on my family website, that getting it free won't be available. I think that that's probably going to happen. But those are sites that wouldn't have existed today. I don't know that it's cannibalizing much. I think it's probably creating new opportunities.
I tend to agree. I think what happens is it's more validation. The fact that there are a lot of different segments of the market, and we're now starting to see those develop a lot more. And some people are really going into the free ad websites, and those folks are going to, a lot of people are going to put up those websites that weren't going to put up websites before because they don't have to give their credit card number. They don't even need a domain, you know. But for people who are really looking for business class hosting, they might have 4 or 5 personal websites, and so they're even more familiar, they're even more validated that that's not what I need for my business. What I need for my business is to be able to go one place and get all the hosting services that I need, and get my DNS services and my ability to have business class email with junk mail filtering and virus filtering, and the ability to customize that, and have lots of add-on services that add value to my business that I know are productivity applications for my business. And those are really different from posting your photos up on the web, or, you know, sharing something with your family. It's a very different way of looking at it. So I think people are willing to go different places for that. But for their business applications, more and more we see SMBs wanting to go one place. They want to have one neck to ring, one bill, one support number for all of their communication services, particularly whether they're telecommunications. Everything's moving to IP now, right? So all your voice applications are on IP. You can get all of those from one provider. And, you know, not just because I'm part of a telecom company, but that is what we really see. People love to have bundled services where they only have one provider to go to for all those services. It's much simpler for them to manage instead of having 4 or 5 different vendors. And, you know, the more applications you can layer on there, particularly as you get into collaboration apps, things like groupware and intranets, and the applications that really folks can see become the hub for how they manage their business, then you really have them locked in. And so where they're going to host their personal photos becomes irrelevant at that point for the business.
So I guess I'm the grandfather of the panel here, but I've been around long enough to see that it comes around again. And there's no such thing as a free lunch. My grandfather would turn over in his grave if he knew what we had to pay for this water that we're drinking here. We saw it, we've seen it many times in our careers. People get into things, they offer it free for 1 or 2 reasons. Hopefully, you know, they're making it from some other through advertising, but, you know, look at some of the software companies that started offering free operating services, or operating systems. And as soon as they got a big enough following, the next thing that came out was a commercial value, a commercial offering. And the next thing you knew, what they had was a huge following, install base. Then all of a sudden said, you know, we really like this operating system, and we're now getting a little bigger. We're going to move up the food chain. We're going to become a small business, a medium business, and they're going to take that commercialized offering. So it's, you know, I look at the history of our company, EV1 and the Planet. We were, you know, in a different market space when we first started, and now you look at our customer bases and what they're paying per server has gone up because we've offered more services. They wanted more security. They wanted bigger, faster. These people who are offering things free, they're not free, or they won't be free for long. It's a method in getting into the market. And ultimately, the person who wants a secure system will pay for the reliability and the services that they can get, but they're going to have to pay for it.
Now, Lou, you mentioned a while ago that there will be more and more services that are hostable. But from a consumer or a business standpoint, what they're looking for is the applications on top, not necessarily the hosting. So do you think the hosting industry is at a disadvantage because unlike Microsoft and Salesforce.com, we don't have the application layer?
Well, I think that the hosters will have the application layer once at the very standardized sort of application. So mail is something that is hosted broadly. You know, I think that we will most likely be the engine behind those specialized applications. I think it's unlikely that hosters are going to become ISVs and develop robust business class applications. But I don't think that's a disadvantage. I think those applications have to get hosted somewhere. And that is a massive market with thousands of players that are all competing. So I don't think that the infrastructure world and the software development world are necessarily one. I think that they actually are massively different sets of skills that are required, and they will become codependent on one another, honestly. So I really don't see it as a disadvantage. I do think businesses will want hosters to provide some of the standardized IT functions like mail, like intranets even potentially. But I think when it comes to an HR application or some specialized payroll system, that is going to be done by specialized ISVs that are building great applications for those business functions.
So why would they distribute it through you rather than through Salesforce.com?
Well, I mean, I don't know that Salesforce, I think that, Salesforce today has an app exchange, but they rely on other hosters to host those applications. They are not necessarily, they are looking to integrate those other providers into their application, but I don't necessarily think that they're looking to do the infrastructure for them. They're trying to make their application more valuable, and they do that by integrating more third-party functions. But I don't think that they think hosting is where the profit is. What they want are partners that are going to have good, reliable infrastructure, and I think that they are going to demand that they get good, reliable infrastructure. But I think they're going to be okay with them doing it with hosters. At least that's sort of what my understanding of how it's working today. So, we host a number of companies that are in the App Exchange, and they don't have Salesforce at all asking them to bring it onto their network. Salesforce has got enough problems keeping their own application up. So,
Barbara and Doug, I'll ask you the same question. Do you think the hosting space is at a disadvantage because we don't have homegrown applications? We're not the ones, we're not the source of applications. Instead, we have to procure it elsewhere. Do you think that put us at a relative disadvantage relative to Microsoft, for instance?
I actually don't, and for several reasons. I think some of the questions that we've alluded to earlier, where that hosters you can't be everything to everybody, and that software development companies do what they do best, which is develop applications for their specific segments, whether they're vertical segments or whether they're horizontal segments, and hosters provide the infrastructure through whatever layer that they provide it, whether it's just PowerPipe and ping in the case of Colo, or whether it's all the way up to application management and monitoring services if you're in the managed services business. And I know for us particularly, we actually do develop a lot of our own software because we found that from a scalability standpoint and a security standpoint and a control and being able to provide a unified customer experience, that has served us well in the specific applications that we've wanted to develop, and those specifically are ones that are adjacent to email and to web hosting. And then we've also brought in some sort of third-party applications and open source applications that have been appropriate and been able to bring them into our infrastructure and provide a unified authentication and billing and customer support mechanism for the customer. So I actually think hosters are sitting in a very good position relative to applications because we can provide the overall infrastructure for applications and not be dependent on one application provider or another. We can host a plethora of them depending on what the customer wants. So I think we actually provide a really valuable service as sort of part of the whole ecosystem of applications hosting.
I've kind of answered this before, but I'll say it a different way. I think that people are in business usually have a core competency, and my career been with 2 hardware companies, and there was every discussion was always about boxes first, and all the ancillary products came second. They both tried to get into the software business, but every conversation, every board meeting, was all about boxes first, and then the software pieces. And I've been in software companies who tried to get into the hardware business or used hardware as the supply, and it was software focused, and then we talked about the boxes. And it's not to say that Microsoft or whoever can't get into that business. There are some companies who are very disciplined and can be in a multitude of businesses, such as GE and other companies. But I think for our, would I worry about it? No, I'm not going to lose sleep over that.
So in fact, you think that we're at an advantage because we're not cluttered by the software?
I think we have an opportunity that we can provide software if we wish, but we then are going to be doing the same thing, maybe cluttering up what our priorities are. But I don't view us at a disadvantage at all.